Thank you for having me tonight, and we'll get started. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Vishakhanvitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarvyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So thank you very much for having me. And tonight's topic is, I was wondering what could I speak about in the month of Kartik. And I was saying that I will just start with some basics so that I can lay some foundation, because most likely there are better speakers who are going to come in the further weeks, and then they would embellish and they would add and they would give the realizations, and then it'll be wonderful. So I thought I'll just stick to the basics. I could define the basics from our scripture in terms of the mellows of devotional service. So that's the purpose. Now, what we want to do is we want to start with a certain tradition of first approaching the Bhagavad-Gita, and then after approaching the Bhagavad-Gita, we would get into the discussion, because fundamentally the Bhagavad-Gita is meant to be approached to understand how Krishna wants us to think. So the Bhagavad-Gita is very fundamental in the sense that it's basically going to allow us to understand how Krishna wants us to think. And then we can approach Krishna in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. And if we understand Srimad Bhagavatam thoroughly, then we can understand the ecstasies of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita is not a basic book. And the reason why it's not a basic book is because the Goswamis of Vrindavan have authored many esoteric principles and books and expansions on Krishna's Leela. And the Sad Goswamis, for example, Jiva Goswami's Sandarbha, Srila Rupa Goswami's works, these are very confidential and very complex works in Sanskrit. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he stayed alongside Srila Jiva Goswami, he stayed alongside the other Goswamis. He took their realizations and condensed them, and then represented them in simple to understand language, in simple Bengali, so that there's little scope for misinterpretation. He presented everything in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita is a collection of the deep realizations of all our acharyas. It contains all the principles of the Sandarbhas. It contains all the principles talked about by Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. And as a consequence, Srila Prabhupada termed it postgraduate study simply because it's a simple to easy to understand version of very complex truths. And as a consequence, it needs to be approached carefully. And one cannot approach the ecstasies of the devotees of Chaitanya Charitamrita if one hasn't experienced Srimad Bhagavatam. And one cannot approach Srimad Bhagavatam properly if one hasn't understood the Bhagavad Gita. So there has to be some reference where we have to take from these three books. So we want to start with the Bhagavad Gita, then go on and understand the others. Yeah. The Bhagavad Gita, in fact, we want to start with Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami Pad talks about Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukulyena, Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktiruttama. He's talking about the definition of superlative bhakti. He's talking about prema bhakti, which is the highest maximum of bhakti, which is prema bhakti. Bhakti is prema bhakti. In reality, there isn't a dilution. Bhakti starts after prema arrives in the heart. Only after love comes into the heart can one understand how to surrender. And without surrender, no one can serve. So as a consequence, the idea of prema has to exist in the heart before one can perform bhakti, which essentially means service. Bhakti is service. So you can't serve unless you're in love. And you can't surrender, which means you can't serve unless you are surrendered. And you can't surrender unless you're in love. So it's a sequence. So as a consequence, what we want to just speak here is that the Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Uttama, this particular verse was spoken by Srila Rupa Goswami, this is also the essence of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this verse essentially talks about Krishna Anushilanam, which is following Krishna's footsteps. So Krishna Anushilanam, when we talk about Krishna Anushilanam, it is normally translated as being favorable towards Krishna. But then being favorable towards Krishna as whom? Do you want to be favorable towards Krishna as someone who is a theologian, who sits in a university, who believes that yes, this is a possibility and then Krishna could be the personality of Godhead? Do you want to be favorable to him as someone who is a worshipper of other personalities, but then also understands that Krishna is God? Is a representation of the absolute truth. So there is an understanding that Krishna is divinity, and as a consequence, there's being favorable. He's being favorable. So none of this is true. In reality, Krishna Anushilanam in this particular verse refers to the fact that we need to follow in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani. Only she can perform Uttama Bhakti as defined by Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami, he was basically a servant of Sri Sri Radha Govindaji, and as far as he was concerned, the greatest devotee is Lord Chaitanya, who comes in the mood of Srimati Radharani. Radharani basically is the highest maximum. If there is a limit, then she is the limit. But there isn't a limit to how much you can serve and what kind of bhakti you can hold in the heart. Krishna is limitless. So is the question of relating to him. Srimati Radharani's bhakti towards Krishna is also quite limitless. You can't really gauge it by any material means. So as a consequence, Anushilanam, following Krishna favorably, here the question of being favorable towards Krishna is not being defined by being favorable by someone else who is outside of Vraja. It is only Srimati Radharani who is setting the boundary of what is favorable. So we are trying to follow the footsteps of Srimati Radharani, but we are not following Srimati Radharani directly. We are following Krishna, who appears in the mood of Srimati Radharani as Lord Gauranga. Yeah, it is his mercy that would allow us to eventually understand the relationship between Krishna and Radharani. So we are trying to follow Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, and Krishna himself could not understand at some level the nature of his devotees. And this is not surprising, because the Shastras have said that of the 64 qualities of Krishna, one of the qualities that he is surrounded by wonderful devotees. He is surrounded by wonderful devotees. He is practically standing out amongst even Sri Narayan. All the Vaikuntha personalities are being overshadowed by Krishna because he is surrounded by a certain kind of special devotees. So now the special devotees, the most special is Srimati Radharani. Now Krishna himself cannot comprehend why devotees are attracted to him. He cannot understand the nature of his beauty. He cannot understand the nature of the extraordinary bhakti experienced by his devotees. And this rasa, because this class is termed Vraja Rasa, we want to first understand and we want to first set the theme. The idea is Krishna himself can't understand this rasa. But what is rasa? Rasa is spiritual relish It is Ananda. He cannot understand Ananda, which is happiness, spiritual happiness experienced by his devotees. He cannot. He is not able to comprehend because he is the object of such happiness. He is the object. And the repository of the happiness is the devotees' hearts. The hearts of the devotees holds the Ananda, the happiness, by interacting with this great personality. So that's why he's called Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu. Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu essentially means that he is the repository of all relationships. Okay, so rasa itself means the spiritual relish, the pleasure one obtains and captures in their heart. Ashraya, which is the repository, and the capturing is done in the heart of the devotee. And this is being experienced by the devotee when they come in touch with Krishna. So the idea is that rasa itself is a spiritual relish and the pleasure that is being experienced by the devotee when they come in touch with Krishna. Krishna couldn't comprehend this. He wanted to descend to experience it himself because it was so special. Because he is surrounded by these devotees. And he actually has a superlative position. He is the avatari. He is the origin. Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the very, very specific instruction that he is the origin of all the avatars because he is the repository of all relationships. Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu. We're going to explain a little bit more, but we want to understand that what is experienced with Krishna is not experienced with others. And as a consequence, he is superlative. He wants to understand the superlative position because he is superior to the position, his own position in Vaikuntha. He is superior to his own position in Vaikuntha. In Vraja, Krishna in Vraja is superior to his own position in the Vaikuntha planets. So this is very special. So he wants to understand what is this Vraja Bhakti? What is this Vraja Rasa? What is the nature of Vraja Rasa? We want to be able to taste it. So he wants to descend to taste this extraordinary rasa. So as a consequence, what we are receiving in the parampara, and our parampara is so special, they are actually receiving the spiritual relish experienced by Mahaprabhu. This is Krishna himself experiencing the spiritual relish of being in touch with him. Yeah, he's in the mood of his greatest servant, Srimati Radharani, and he's experiencing an extraordinary bhakti and devotion towards himself. And he is actually sharing that devotion through the disciplic succession into our hearts. The whole concept of rasa has flown from the heart of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. It is flowing through the disciplic succession because as he speaks, his words carry the mellow of his attachment to Krishna because this is Radharani's attachment to Krishna. And the sound vibration enters into the ears of Rupa Sanatana Goswamis and the other associates of Mahaprabhu, the personal associates. They have started the disciplic succession and then they are initiating other disciples with Krishna's confidential mantras. And as they receive the mantra, the realization that they hold in the heart is also passed on through sound vibrations into the heart of the disciplic succession. So we in turn are so fortunate that the rasa that is flowing in our heart, the spiritual relish that is flowing in our heart, the pleasure that we get in connecting with Krishna as of today has come from Krishna himself. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is basically Srimati Radharani's kripa. It is actually flowing from her heart because Krishna has come in the mood of Srimati Radharani as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it is dancing in our hearts as we add more and more, I would say, effort towards it. So rasa itself is spiritual relish. And spiritual relish has a few ingredients. Everything has ingredients. Yeah, if you make a wonderful glass of, let's say, nectar, your Sunday feast in general, we call it nectar. And, it's mango juice or whatever juice it is. If you were to make a cup of juice to offer to Krishna and then distribute to the Vaishnavas, it has a certain rasa. It has a certain taste. Depending on the mango that's being used, depending on how ripe it is and how carefully it has been prepared and offered, it would carry a flavor of being enjoyed by the Lord as well. Now, there are ingredients to rasa. So when we use the word Akhila Rasamrita Sindhu, he is the repository of all rasas. Essentially, we are saying that he is the repository of all pleasures in all kinds of relationships that one can ever have with Krishna, with God. Yeah. So when we use the word rasa, rasa has a few ingredients. We need to understand the ingredients And those ingredients are, the first and foremost ingredient of rasa is faith, Shraddha. And then the next ingredient is being fixed, Nishtha. The next ingredient is Ruchi. Then one develops a taste. If they're steady and they have faith, they develop a taste in chanting Harinam. Yeah. So there is Shraddha, the first ingredient of rasa. The next ingredient of rasa is Ruchi, which is taste. And the third ingredient of rasa is Ashakti. So one becomes very attached to chanting, and one becomes very attached to seva and chanting Krishna's names because they're experiencing this extraordinary nectar that is flowing due to the establishment of faith and due to the establishment of steadiness because of that faith. Yeah. And then after Shraddha, after Ruchi, Nishtha, which is being steady, and then there's Ruchi, which is taste, then there is Ashakti. Ashakti is being attached to such endeavor. And when one devotee comes into Ashakti, which is being attached to the endeavor of chanting Harinam, because they are experiencing great taste, Ruchi, and they are steady in their endeavor because their faith has actually increased. And what is the meaning of faith? Faith in reality is what you experience. If you are able to see me on Zoom, you do have faith that I'm alive and I'm sitting in front of you and I'm speaking, because you're able to perceive my presence through your senses. So this is basically an experience. This is an experience, so you don't need to be convinced by others that I'm on the other side. Similarly, if I were to see you, then I don't need to be convinced because I can actually perceive your presence through my senses. So faith at the highest level is experiences. These are experiences. Yeah, faith at the highest level is experiences. But then, what kind of experiences? As one increases the endeavor in bhakti, Krishna practically provides them stimulation. Krishna provides them with opportunity. Krishna provides them with experiences. So as a consequence, as each year passes where one has endeavored very steadily with whatever faith they've initially received, that faith actually has the ability to grow because there are more and more experiences. Krishna consciousness is not so much a matter of walking on a plain field where the divine couple are on the other side, and then we endeavor walking a few miles, several hundred miles through life, and then we reach the other side. Krishna consciousness doesn't work that way. Krishna consciousness is like scaling a peak. You need to be able to be prepared to quantify each effort that you put in this year and then expand on the effort the subsequent year, and then be frustrated if it's not working, beg for mercy, and then cry for more and more because you're scaling a peak. And as you scale a peak, there will be plateaus in between. And as you reach a plateau, Krishna is giving you a reward for furthering our quest of climbing more and more and more. So this is rasa. Rasa is the reward because you are obtaining a certain sense of pleasure, of being able to capture the pleasure of coming in touch with Krishna in our heart, and we are experiencing that very special spiritual bliss. Yeah. So we are pleasure seekers by nature. We are pleasure seekers by nature. So for example, I said faith, the ingredients of rasa. There is faith, there is nishtha, which is steadiness, and then faith and steadiness and endeavoring with faith and steadiness in the chanting of Harinam will result in ruchi, taste, and then when one has to taste, they further their effort and they reach the position of attachment to the process. Now, the same thing is applicable to what is found in the mundane sphere. So we spoke of the idea of being attached to Krishna, right? We spoke of the idea of Krishna being the source of rasa. So it's flowing from him into our heart. It is the repository. Our heart is basically capturing that and we're experiencing pleasure. But then there is also this idea that we could also be attracted to the mundane world. We could be attracted, for example, some people watch movies. They have a certain taste for movies. So now there is a rasa between the movie stars and the watcher. So this is mundane, but there is an exchange which is going on. and their heart is being filled with this very paltry, somewhat disturbing rasa that flows from the mundane experiences they have. The more effort you put in and more steady we become in mundane activities, then we would be repositories of mundane rasa. Yeah? We will be repositories of mundane rasa depending on the amount of endeavor we put in coming in touch with the objects that are mundane. To the extent to which an object is not connected to Krishna, to that extent we can classify it as being mundane. When I say not connected, in one sense, he has created the world, even nations is a part of him. One could argue philosophically, but the point is that this does not stimulate my attachment to him. It does not stimulate my waking up tomorrow in the morning to chant Harinam. It is not stimulating service. As a consequence, I would say that this is mundane because of the fact that it is practically increasing my distance between myself and my perception of who I am in terms of Krishna, with Krishna. So the extraordinary effort that is being put in mundane achievements, when we start terming ourselves as something in the mundane world and we put in a lot of water under that particular tree, then there is an exchange of rasa because we have a certain sense of pleasure. Because we are pleasure seekers by nature, no one is going to endeavor if there's going to be pain. There's some pleasure that's coming through, but it's mundane, it's paltry, it's going to end, and it is always dual. It has two sides to the same coin, which means that at some point it is going to disappoint us. So the point is there are certain characteristics where you can also say that mundane relationships can provide certain rasa. Mundane activities can provide rasa, but that is very paltry. And we want to leave the expansion of such rasas to many thousands of people who comment on it. The whole social media enterprise today is simply proof of the rasa that's flowing in the mundane world. Yeah, it is extraordinary. If there is an expansion of social media over the last 15, 20 years, whatever the case may be, with the internet, it is because people are seeking this particular connection and they are absorbing themselves. They take it too seriously. Yeah. I was totally shocked when someone said, they walked away from my group, they walked away from my friend, they didn't accept me as a friend. And I said, what are you talking about? It's an electronic media. Maybe they didn't even notice that. So the point is that people take these things too seriously because there's extraordinary exchange of mundane rasa that's going on between them and the various topics that are embellishing the internet. Now, if someone we have to make an extraordinary investment in Brahman realization, it will result in Brahman rasa. Brahman rasa is nothing but a realization that mundane pursuits in themselves are sources of pain. So this is the Jnani realization. They come to a conclusion that mundane pursuits are useless because they're going to be sources of pain. I want out. Yeah. The conclusion of the Brahman rasa is that I want out. I want out of this universe. I do not want to come back. So the idea of not wanting to come back becomes the objective. In that particular perspective, you might find that the personalities who invest in Brahman rasa, they might even worship Krishna, but then Krishna is merely an instrument. They will worship Krishna and Srimati Radharani as a means to want out. Yeah, there's a big distinction. You'll have to understand that you could find many, many temples around in India where the deities of Srimati Radharani and Krishna are worshipped, but then what is the motivation? Do they want out? And they have found the ideal deities for them to be able to give the want out experience. So you could have a want out personality worshipping and investing time and then doing very steady deity worship, etc. And all of this requires bhakti. Bhakti is an ingredient even for Brahman rasa. But then the objective being crooked, which means that Krishna is an instrument, Krishna is simply what we would call as a medium for them to attain something which they have in mind. Then Krishna basically is there and he gives them what they want. But then the point is that if they're going to invest in Brahman rasa, they will experience Brahman rasa. Just as someone invested in mundane rasa, they're going to experience mundane rasa. If they're going to invest in Brahman rasa, they will experience Brahman rasa. So they will experience this feeling of being, aloof and transcendental in terms of experiences of this world. So I wouldn't really minimize it to the point of saying that it is bad. It is much better than those who pursue, karma kanda. It's much, much better than those who completely are neglectful and they're just pursuing what's available in a very paltry way. It's much, much better. But we spoke earlier. Srila Rupa Goswami said, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavratam. He is rejecting jnana. He is rejecting this whole notion of keeping an objective, of wanting out to worship and approach Srimati Radharani and Krishna. He is rejecting this whole objective of wanting to arrange for things in this world, then approaching Srimati Radharani and Krishna. He's saying these things are not basically the objective of Bhakti Rasa. Bhakti Rasa will not flow in our hearts. We might experience a feeling of attachment, we may experience a little bit here and there, but if these are the objectives, Bhakti Rasa is not going to enter, because Bhakti Rasa requires love and it requires surrender. And then there's a flow of Bhakti Rasa. So Bhakti Rasa requires a lot more. It requires Shraddha at the highest level. It requires, which means experiences. Then it requires Ruchi, Nishtha, steadiness. It requires Ruchi. It requires Ashakti. Bhakti Rasa won't flow if there are objectives that are subpar. Yeah. So this is the other point. Now, some of us invest time in Paramatma realization. So the yogi, for instance, would do Paramatma realization. He is basically wanting to experience this whole so-called experience of Yogi Rasa. Yeah? Yogi Rasa is basically simply a circumstance where there is pleasure, but then this pleasure in itself is related to visual appearance of the Lord in the heart. Yeah? He appears in the heart. So it's an extraordinary achievement from the perspective of being able to see the Lord in the heart. But then, where is the opportunity for service? Where is the opportunity for interaction? He is in the heart and he is showing his presence, and then the yogi is viewing it. So as a consequence, even yogis experience this particular rasa, and that rasa is also considered to be of a medium level intensity. So Brahman rasa and yogis experiencing Paramatma realization, that particular rasa, these are relationship with Krishna, is considered to be of medium intensity, Shanta Rasa. Shanta means there is no endeavor or reciprocation of wanting to serve. There is none. They are just sitting there wanting to experience one kind of benefit or the other, wanting to experience coming in touch with the Brahman realization aspect of Krishna, wanting to be free of anxiety, or wanting to see the Lord, but this is of a medium level intensity. But this is Shanta Rasa, because there really isn't a relationship yet. There isn't such a thing as a relationship. Now, beyond this whole concept of Shanta Rasa, and our objective while chanting Harinam cannot fall into this category. We are not interested in this. If they come to the Vaikuntha Loka, where the Shanta Rasa becomes more intense, it becomes more intense, which means that it has really increased in intensity. Then they come to the Vaikuntha Lokas. In the Vaikuntha Lokas, they can submit themselves to service if the Lord desires to use them. Yeah. So for instance, if the Lord wants to sit on a couch, the couch is conscious in Vaikuntha, and the couch is in Shantarasa. It doesn't really go and approach the Lord. It is there. If he wants to use it, then it is basically a concept of Shantarasa. Similarly, a tree wants to provide some kind of fruit. Yeah. Unless Krishna comes and sits under the tree and says, give me a fruit, the tree is not going to be able to move. He's not going to serve. He's interested in serving, but he'll not be able to. This is also the higher expression of Shantarasa. The lower aspect of Shantarasa is the Brahman realization, which is the Brahma Rasa, the idea of wanting to leave this particular material creation. And somewhat similar is the Paramatma realization, which is also of a somewhat of a medium intensity. The higher intensity, they come to Vaikuntha. In Vaikuntha, they give themselves they are providing themselves for service to the Lord. They are providing themselves for service to the Lord. Now, as the Shanta Rasa intensifies and the Rasa intensifies, as the mellow intensifies, it goes on to the next level of Dasya. Dasya is servitude. You can experience Krishna in the mood of a servant. You can experience Lord Narasimha in the Vaikuntha Lokas in the mood of a servant. Yeah, you can experience Lord Ram, Lord Sri Ram, in the mood of a servant. But this dasya in the Vaikuntha Loka, anything beyond dasya cannot exist in the Vaikuntha Lokas. Essentially, even in Sri Ramayana, the mood of Lord Hanuman and the mood of Lord Lakshman. Lord Lakshman was a brother, and Lord Hanuman exemplified service. But as Lakshman was serving Lord Sri Ram, he wanted he couldn't get that intimate exchange of a brother. He couldn't get the intimate exchange of a brother. What he could obtain was dasya, which is servitude. And there's a reason for this. And the reason is that even someone like Sri Lakshman, who is a brother of Lord Ram in the Vaikuntha planets, has to follow rules and regulations because that entire atmosphere is filled with Aishwarya, which is the opulence of the Lord as being supremely powerful. When the Lord is representing himself as supremely powerful, the only thing that you can do is serve him. You cannot really go up and say that I'm going to put my arm around your shoulder. I'm your brother. You can't do that because there's so much formality in representing yourself in the Vaikuntha Lokas, because the Lord's position there is an extraordinarily formal one, which is very, very extraordinarily opulent. So we need to understand that even the opportunity for Sakya, which is brotherhood, even though they were brothers, the Sakya relationship was not available in Sri Ramayana for Lakshman. He was actually thirsting for it. He was actually wanting it. The reason was because Lord Ram's position was of a king, and there were so many strictures and so many regulations and so many different formalities in being able to interact with the population that included his own family. And as a consequence, Lakshman, the brother, and the most dear servant, Lord Hanuman, all of them could only experience dasya. The maximum limit in the Vaikuntha Lokas is dasya. You can't go above it. You cannot really go beyond that in the Vaikuntha Lokas. It's very difficult because of the fact that the Lord is representing himself in an extraordinarily Aishwaryamayi position. So there is a distinction between Aishwarya and Madhurya. Now, when I use the word Madhurya here, I'm talking about sweetness, and this sweetness that is found in Vraja, in Vraja Rasa, is not found in the Vaikuntha Lokas. So the devotees in the Vaikuntha Lokas can only go up to Dasya. They cannot go beyond that. Mother Lakshmi, the consort, can only sit at the lotus feet of Narayan and massage his lotus feet. This is one form of rendering service in servitude. This is one form. Yeah, there is an intimate relationship of husband and wife, but her representation is predominantly at his lotus feet rendering service, because that is the formality of Lord Narayan. That is the formality of the Vaikuntha Lokas. Dasya is the maximum you could go to. This is the maximum rasa that's experienced in the Vaikuntha Lokas. For anything beyond Dasya, and there is Sakya, which is the next. Sakya essentially is friendship. In English, we call it, fraternal love. There's an exchange of fraternal relationship with Krishna, and the fraternal relationship needs to be unrestricted, because this is fluid. Rasa is like, some kind of an extraordinary ocean or a river that's flowing from Krishna to our heart, and it has to be unrestricted. The unrestricted nature can't even have any kind of formality, any kind of stricture, because then it would become tainted with such a formality. So that is not possible in Vaikuntha, but that particular expression is found in Vrajabhumi. Vraja Rasa is so special that Krishna can represent himself here, and he can be completely devoid of any particular expression of being supremely powerful. The demigods could see he does these extraordinary feats. He lifts up Govardhan. Yeah, we had Govardhan Puja a couple of days back. He lifts up Govardhan, yeah, and then he basically, kind of kills all the demons who come into Vrajabhumi. He does all these extraordinary feats. At a very young age, he's doing all kinds of wonderful things. So he's showing all kinds of superhuman tendencies. But even with all these superhuman tendencies, the Vrajavasis, they don't find any restriction in the exchange of rasa between them and Krishna. So the cowherd boy friends of Krishna do not have a problem in putting their feet on him and saying, okay, massage my feet, I am tired. Krishna, I have run so far, okay, massage my feet. Impossible to do in Vaikuntha, but in Vraja, this rasa flows without any restriction. That's the beauty of rasa. And that is the beauty of Vraja. Vrajabhumi, the flow of this ocean of nectar, of relationship between the Lord and the Jiva. And because it is Krishna, it is only Krishna in Vraja. So that's why he's surrounded by this extraordinary group of devotees. He's basically giving this prema, and there's an exchange of prema, an exchange of love between him and his devotees, which is so intense that it is only found in Vrajabhumi. It is unrestricted. There is no formality. Mother Yashoda can tie him up. Yeah? Mother Yashoda can tie him up. Now this is the Damodar month. Dama Udara, right? So basically, Mother Yashoda can practically bind this great personality who lifted the entire earth on his nostrils, when he was on his snout, we would call it, as Lord Varaha. She practically bound him up. Yeah, he gave some chase and he gave some trouble, but then she was able to capture him and bind him up. This extraordinary pastime is one of the 64 qualities of Krishna. This extraordinary pastime of Damodara is one of the 64 qualities of Krishna. Yeah. This Bali Leela in Gokul is not found anywhere else. As a consequence, this is basically one of his opulences. Of the 64 opulences, where the 4 opulences where Krishna claims superiority to Lord Narayan, superiority to the Vaikuntha, the representations of the Supreme Lord, one of them is this kind of Leela that he displays as a young child. And as Damodar, this particular month is Damodar Mas, very special. And in this particular month, Krishna allows Mother Yashoda to tie him up. Impossible to do in Vaikuntha Loka. Impossible. You cannot, because Krishna allows for this rasa to flow in an unrestricted manner. It's eternal. It is happening all the time. Similarly, with the Vraja Gopis. With the Vraja Gopis, what is so extraordinary about the Vraja Gopis is that there is no philosophical concept or restriction that flows between Krishna. There is no obstruction at all of the flow of exchange of love between the Gopis and Krishna. This particular example is given, which you all must be familiar with. I was just listening to a discourse last night from a great Vaishnava of a different Sampradaya, Vaishnava Sampradaya. And he was talking about how the idea of relieving Krishna from his pain, headache, he asks for dust from the feet of all the personalities. So they approach Vyasadeva, because Vyasadeva is the most learned. And Vyasadeva practically says, no, it's impossible. How would I give dust so that he could put it on his head? It's impossible for me to do. And then they approach the other great personalities who are all extraordinarily well learned. They all refuse because they just basically can't submit themselves to the fact that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. And they somehow or the other can't be, forced to basically give their dust so that he could apply it on the head. He's suffering from a headache. Krishna is suffering from a headache. And he wants dust. And he says, I want dust from the lotus feet of my devotees. That is basically what is going to cure me. So everyone who is intellectually well-founded, like Srila Vyasadeva and other great sages, everyone refuses. The Vrajavasi women, the gopis, they don't hesitate, even for a single moment. They practically remove the dust from their lotus feet and then pass it on, because there is no philosophical consideration of what will happen to me. He is supreme, I am minuscule, I am Jiva, he is basically Paramatma, So what would happen to me? This question doesn't arise in their minds. What does arise in their minds is Krishna wants this. He wants to be relieved of a headache. So this is what I need to do. This is very simple. And this is basically simply an expression of Vraja, where this mellow of love between Srimati Radharani and Krishna, it's far beyond our comprehension, but we can understand that there is no philosophical basis or foundation or contemplation and intellectual understanding of who he is and what he is and so on and so forth. No rules that can be subjugated and so on and so forth. Yeah, there aren't. So they are basically interacting with Krishna, and the flow of rasa in Vraja is unrestricted. There is no restriction whatsoever. There is no restriction. Yeah? There is no restriction whatsoever. So this is why Vraja is so special. And this is why Srila Rupa Goswami, when he is basically telling us, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmani Anavritam, Anukulyena Krishna Anushirinam Bhakti Uttama, he is practically saying that if you have other ideas of wanting to pursue objectives of liberation, which is wanting out of this world, if you have ideas of wanting to accomplish things within this world, then you cannot really follow Krishna. Anya Bilashita Shunyam, that has to practically end. Now the question is, what is in it for us? Why would we give up the idea of being relieved of suffering? Why would we give up the idea of being able to achieve things in this world? The idea is that the flow of rasa from Krishna's heart to us is superlative. This is coming from those who have experienced it. They have experienced it. They've experienced it in reality, which is why we talk about pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, right? They have basically experienced this particular rasa, and once they have captured it into their hearts, the hearts have been transformed. Their faith is at the level of experiences, and they are passing their faith on through disciplic succession so that it can reach our hearts. Now, the point is, they are practically experiencing things which are far beyond anything that can be achieved, including the idea of liberation. So, Anya Bilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anukulyena Krishna Anushirinam Bhakti Uttama. This particular verse very specifically defines the fact that a very special gift has descended into our hearts. And this is very important for us to know. The sound vibration of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has gone into the ears of Srila Rupa Goswami. It has gone into the ears of Sanatan Goswami, Jiva Goswami Pad, the other Goswamis, Raghunath Bhatta and Raghunath Das Goswami, and the other great devotees. They have initiated, and then they have initiated again, further and further and further, and we practically are receiving the sound vibration in disciplic succession. As we cultivate our faith, then we have the ability to experience this superlative rasa, where one feels that nothing matters, which is why Krishna says he's surrounded by devotees who are considered mad, because what is experienced with Krishna is Divya Mada, it is transcendental madness. We hear in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Lord Nityananda walking around the road, and he is filled with Krishna Prema. Mahaprabhu takes his Krishna Prema and then bestows Lord Nityananda with all this Krishna Prema. All the compassion of Srimati Radharani is in the heart of Lord Nityananda. Because in that one order, go and spread my message, Mahaprabhu has practically passed all his emotions to Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda becomes totally mad, Divya Mada, transcendentally mad, because he is carrying this enormously, amazingly sweet nectar in his heart. As he walks on the streets of Navadvip, we read in different scriptures which are associated with the Navadvip pastimes. People go mad coming in touch with Lord Nityananda. Just in proximity, there's a spillover effect. And the spillover effect is such that people actually go crazy in a good way, which is a transcendental way. Not crazy as in, in a normal way. Sometimes for an external observer, you may not find the difference, but in reality, they go crazy because they have received this drop and there's a spillover from Lord Nityananda. So this particular nectar that's been flowing from Lord Chaitanya all the way into our hearts, it basically requires a single point focus. Now let's go to the Bhagavad-Gita, and then we will just touch upon a couple of verses where the single point focus is being spoken of. Yeah? Srila Prabhupada basically used to like this verse a lot. It's 2.41. Vyavasatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahusakahi anantascha buddhayo vyavasainam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose. Their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So, this is the same thing. Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavrita. Anukulena krishna nushinam bhakti uttama. There has to be ekanishta. There's a single-pointed focus. Again, go back to the ingredients of rasa. Rasa requires faith. Faith is obtained through endeavor, and endeavor results in experiences. When I use the word endeavor, I'm talking about service. Because when you do some services, then we have the ability to experience things. And one of the most important services, the most important, this whole movement is for the purpose of us being able to chant. So if there is any service that is absolutely important, then it is the chanting of Harinam. So the point we are trying to make here is that it has to have the ingredient of faith. Faith is received from those who are faithful. The faithful have had experiences. They have seen the truth, and as a consequence, they carry that faith in their heart. So when they share things, then that faith goes into the heart of those who receive things. Parikshit Maharaj, he was an extraordinarily renowned listener. So he listened to Srimad Bhagavatam. He just didn't listen. He was asking questions. Srila Sukadev Goswami was the most renowned speaker. So he was speaking Srimad Bhagavatam continuously, but then he allowed Parikshit Maharaj to ask questions because this is particularly important. So this exchange of questions between the speaker and the listener, and then the benefit the whole universe obtains is being demonstrated in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srimad Bhagavatam, the entire topic is to initiate the flow of this rasa. So we are very special in one sense. And I'm not saying this out of false pride. We are all very special from the perspective that we have been given an opportunity to serve in Mahaprabhu's movement. So Mahaprabhu is giving us an opportunity to understand Vraja Rasa. Vraja Rasa is not as well understood in any other Vaishnava Sampradaya as much as we have understood it through the blessings of Mahaprabhu and his servants. So we are very fortunate that we have been given this opportunity to understand Vraja Rasa. We have been given Harinam, which is Krishna himself. And then we have been given Srimad Bhagavatam. So as we become very serious in chanting Harinam, then Bhagavatam starts revealing itself to us. So we experience Krishna through Nama, we experience Krishna through the book Srimad Bhagavatam. Then when someone has deep experiences, they have the ability to share. When they share, their experiences flow into our ears. As a consequence, Parikshit Maharaj demonstrated what is required in Kali Yuga. He practically demonstrated the fact that in Kali Yuga, in this particular Yuga, the way out is through hearing. But what is it that is going to allow us to hear properly? Yeah, what is going to allow us to hear properly is our ability to chant. So unless there is serious chanting, then one has the ability to hear. And then when one has the ability to hear, the faith develops because the faith of the speaker goes into the heart. And the speaker has received it from someone else because no one really holds treasures here. We all receive things. As a consequence, we all pass on what we receive. And as we pass on what we receive, we also pass on our faith. We pass on our sambandha. Krishna sambandha is in the heart. Krishna is the Vishaya. He is the object. Ashraya is my heart. My heart has practically captured the flow of rasa from Krishna. So there is a relationship in my heart between me and Krishna. Now this relationship will have its effect when someone shares things about Krishna. In other words, that if someone has Krishna's rasa in the heart and the rasa is flowing, then that rasa will have the ability to transform into sound vibrations. This is bhakti. And then enter into our ears and inspire us to serve in such a way that we can also have the same experience. Right? So this resolution of purpose requires faith. Faith comes from the faithful. So association and hearing is very important. Number two, service. Whatever we read we experience when we serve. So if we read certain conclusions and we have the ability to serve, then the service gives us an opportunity to comprehend and to understand that particular essence very nicely. So without service, one cannot really have realizations. They can't really take theory and then implement it without service. You could be serving a deity, and then that could be experiences. So there has to be service, because our sambandha is service. So when there's Krishna sambandha in the heart, when there's a relationship in the heart, sambandha means relationship. So when there's Krishna sambandha in the heart, this Krishna sambandha should prompt us to engage in bhakti, which is abhideya. Abhida is to serve, and it is also the same as bhakti. Yeah, and then it results in a furtherance of love, which is prema, which is prayojana tattva. This is again an unlimited cycle. One develops deeper sambandha. If they have deeper sambandha, their service is much better. Yeah, it is like Mother Yashoda. Mother Yashoda calling Krishna is with very deep sambandha. What is her sambandha? She doesn't have to be tutored. She doesn't have to be initiated. She doesn't have to be told you're the mother of this particular boy. She calls out, you're hungry. She thinks he is dependent on her, which is the mood which Mahaprabhu wants us to cultivate. It's a strange thing. He wants us to cultivate the mood that Krishna is dependent on us. He wants us to cultivate the mood that his movement is dependent on us. Imagine the movement being dependent on us. We can't even take care of ourselves properly. The movement is not dependent on us, but he wants us to cultivate that mood. So Mother Yashoda's mood is where you can see this. She practically thinks that Krishna is dependent on me. Have you eaten? He should be cared for. Balaram has to take care of him. Take him to the forest, be by his side. I'm so afraid because there are so many different obstacles coming on his way. So this parental love is just flowing unrestricted towards her boy. And because she is just flowing unrestricted, the sambandha which she has is so strong that there really isn't any tutoring required. In our case, we are cultivating a sambandha with the Lord. We are cultivating. How do we cultivate? We cultivate by association, sadhu sangha. We cultivate by namasmaran, namakirtan. We cultivate by Bhagavat Shravanam. We cultivate by Sri Murti Seva. We cultivate by Mathura Vas. Now, how much time do I have? I have a few more minutes. Now, in understanding the flow of rasa, one needs to come to Vraja. In Vraja Bhakti, what is super special is that Mathura Mandal, this district of Mathura, is so special that it is like Nam. It is self-forgiving. Even if someone comes here, they can get artha, they can get dharma, they can accomplish their objectives of dharma, they can accomplish the objectives of artha, kama, and then they can accomplish the objectives of moksha. Yeah. Our acharyas are rejecting all of that. They are going straight for the greatest fruit, which is coming from the heart of Mahaprabhu. Remember, what we are receiving has come from Mahaprabhu's heart. How fortunate can one be? And why would we not have Anya Bilashita Shunyam? Yeah. Why would we have multiple objectives when we have this that has been given, which has come directly from the heart of the divine couple? It has come from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart. The sound vibration has reached our ears through the source of Srila Prabhupada and his servants in disciplic succession. Why would we not be resolute in purpose? Yeah. So the point being that in Mathura Mandal, if you come here to Mathura Mandal, then in Mathura Mandal is forgiving of even offenses. Just like Nam is forgiving of offenses, Mathura Mandal, you can resolve even your offenses. By coming and doing sadhana here, then you also resolve your offenses towards Mathura Mandal. Say, for example, we say there's Dham Aparad. Dham Aparad can be resolved even here. All kinds of aparad can be resolved here by just doing seva and then serving the Vaishnavas and then being able to chant Harinam. This is so special. Mathura Mandal is what stimulates Krishna Sambandha. When we come here, then we see the idea and come in touch with the actual spiritual world. What we see here in Vrindavan and in Mathura is a very thin covering. This material covering is very, very thin. If one endeavors to chant, the covering parts and then one is able to see Leela. because this is the only place where Krishna's Leela is always manifest. This is the only place. Yeah. They say in every other pilgrimage spot, there are many special pilgrimage spots. Krishna's Leela is not manifest because it's hidden. You'll have to have special vision. Here, it is always happening. It is consistently happening, and the covering is very thin. So with a little endeavor, when someone comes here, and if they're accompanied by those who have deep faith, who have already experienced it, they have the ability to see Vrindavan, and they have the ability to experience Krishna's pastimes. So Mathura is very, very special. Now in Mathura Mandal, why is Mathura Mandal so special? This town of Vrindavan is super special. The town of Vrindavan was chosen by Krishna, but this Vrindavan here is non-different from Goloka Vrindavan. When I say it's non-different, does it mean that there is basically the idea that Krishna came here and then did his pastimes, and then these pastimes themselves are unmanifest? The answer is no. This particular Mathura Mandal, this town of Vrindavan, is the spiritual sky. There's no difference. It is the spiritual sky. If one endeavors very carefully in their sadhana, if they become irresolute, if they become resolute in purpose, if they develop the mood required by Srila Rupa Goswami of Anyabhilashita Shunyam, then they have the ability to request help to part the covering. The material covering can't be parted. Yeah, it can be parted. It is parted, and then the pastimes are being revealed because the pastimes here are the same. This particular place is the same as Goloka. Yeah, one may understand that this is like a dimension. You're entering into a dimension. And Goloka is a dimension that exists here in Vrindavan in full glory. So this is not a historical spot of pastimes where Krishna appeared and then conducted his disappearance. And so we come here and then we basically are in an area where Krishna was once there. No, this is where he is, and he is always there. He is fully present. He is always fully present in Vrindavan. He never leaves. So there is no question of even debating the difference between this Bhauma Leela, this particular spot here on this planet, and then trying to distinguish whether there's something is different between this and then in Goloka. No, it isn't. Krishna is always here because this is Goloka. This is Goloka. It's a thin covering. So we might see gutters overflowing, we may see a few pigs, and we may see monkeys, we may see dogs, we may see troublesome, people suffering with different kinds of problems and so on and so forth. All of this are experienced when people come on yatra, but please understand that the reason why we are seeing all of that is because we have not been granted the permission to be able to actually experience Vraja. So how do we experience Vraja? We don't see with our eyes, we see through our ears. So we always accompany those who have had experiences so that they could speak out of their experiences. This is the whole concept of pranipatena, pariprashnena, sevaya. So the seva aspect has to be there. The mood of seva has to be there. Then the person has the ability to part it. Yeah. So the screen is parted because someone has the ability to what we call as someone has the ability to request that such mercy be given. In Mathura Mandal, you have Vrindavan, which is super special. That's why Mathura is super special. This is non-different. Govardhan is the second place, which is non-different. Non-different from the perspective that Govardhan is Krishna. And Govardhan is the most amazing mountain. It is not the Himalayas, but what is distinguishing between Himalayas and Govardhan? What is distinguishing Himalayas and Govardhan is Govardhan has the ability to give us Krishna Rasa. It can give us Vraja Prem. Himalayas cannot give you Vraja Prem. Govardhan Parvat can give us Vraja Prem because it is a part of Vraja. It can give, the great mountain, Giriraj can give us Vraja Prem. If you go there, Vraja Prem is overflowing in abundance in the area of Govardhan, in Sri Radha Kund, and all those places. And as a consequence, Giriraj can give us Vraja Prem. That's the difference between the mountain in Vraja and a mountain such as Himalayas, where one could say it's superlative, it's great sages have performed penances. All that is true, but then Govardhan can give us rasa, and it is a part of the eternal spiritual sky. Giriraj is a part of the eternal spiritual sky. Now, we have Sri Yamuna. What is the difference between Yamuna and Gangaji? Ganga and Yamuna, in one sense, they are tributaries. Yamuna ji is parted from Ganga. She has come from Yamunotri. Technically, people can't see things, but that is technically how it is understood. But what is so special about Yamuna ji, and how is she different from Sri Ganga? Sri Ganga can offer liberation, but she cannot give you bhakti rasa towards Krishna, Vraja Prem. Yamuna represents Vraja Prem in full glory. She is practically the rasa that flows from the Lord's lotus feet. She is practically the rasa that flows from the lotus feet. Coming in touch with Sri Yamuna and coming in touch with the banks of Yamuna where so many different pastimes occurred, that can practically give us Vraja Prem, even though Sri Ganga can only give us liberation. Sri Ganga can take us out of the material world, but Yamuna ji can actually take our hand and place our hand in Krishna's hand. So this is the beauty of Vraja. So the Vraja Rasa is to be understood as special, not only because Krishna is Akhila Rasa Amrita Sindhu. You cannot go beyond Dasya in the Vaikuntha planets. Here, it's unrestricted. Vraja Prem is also superlative because what we are receiving very specifically in our parampara has come from the heart of Mahaprabhu. So he has practically experienced and realized what Srimati Radharani experiences, and he is passing on those sound vibrations through disciplic succession for us to experience. And in other words, here we are also talking about Vraja Rasa, because Vraja in reality is the super special spot in the entire creation, simply because Vraja is non-different from Goloka. This is not a theological view. It is not a philosophical view. It is non-different. This is not a historical spot. It is as current with pastimes and as rich with pastimes now as it was in the past. Yeah? The covering is very thin. So that's the beauty of Vraja. So Mathura Mandal is considered to be super good. So what we are trying to say here is that we are pleasure seekers by nature, and the maximum amount of pleasure one can experience in rasa is from this mundane rasa, which whatever people experience is paltry, insignificant. At a very medium level, that experience by the Brahmavadis is experienced. At a medium level, the Paramatma realization yogis experience. The fullest extent of rasa is experienced by those in the Vaikuntha planets in Dasya. But beyond Dasya, what is experienced in Vraja is very, very special. So I'm going to stop here because I think I may have taken a little bit more time than what was delineated. I'll stop here and I'll take some questions. The idea was just to basically set things up so that we could meditate more on Krishna's pastimes as we go along in the month of Kartik.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It's okay. I mean, we have some time, but that's fine. Yeah, I'd love to take some questions. Anybody wants to ask any questions, please do so now. Add them in the chat box so you can come and ask them. You can unmute yourself and ask the questions. And while we wait for that, I will make a start while everybody's contemplating their questions. So basically, Prabhuji, I mean, most of us, we go to Vrindavan, and like you say, we notice all the negative things because we're really not qualified to be there. But we still get the mercy, right? We still get the mercy just for being there, just being present in Vrindavan, because from what you told me, we just want to catch a ticket now and go there. And anybody who ever goes to India should never miss going to Vrindavan. So, but the mercy still flows for everyone who visits Vrindavan.
The answer is yes, it does, but then we could do better. The way it works is as follows. For the Vrajvasi, the first stop when you come to Vrindavan is for us to go to Gopeshwar Mahadev. Lord Shiva, who sits right at the gate of the spiritual sky, if you go to Vamsivat in Vrindavan, Vamsivat is where the most confidential exchanges between the divine couple, the Ras Leela, takes place. But protecting the Ras Leela, protecting Vrindavan, Lord Shiva sits right at the gate. He is Gopeshwar. So going to him and bowing down to him and begging for mercy would allow us to experience Vrindavan in a different way. He would, as the Guru, he would lift the veil, he would lift the material covering, and he would allow us to experience Vraja. So we could do better than just visiting. We could first go to him and beg for mercy, and then we could move around in Vraja, and we wouldn't be disturbed by what happens, because our heart would flow with, the wonderful experiences of Vraja. We wouldn't be disturbed so much.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, if we actually experience those high experience, would we actually come back to UK? Would you want to come back, or you just want to give up everything, close shop, and stay? I think this is what you've done, Prabhuji. You decided to stay.
No, well, basically, my timing was pretty good, because I came here in 2019, and then COVID caught up with the world.
Yeah.
And then, so it was quite natural for us to just stay back. But the point is that the idea of Mahaprabhu's movement is that we want to be able to experience what is being experienced here. We want to carry those experiences and distribute it when we chant on the streets of Birmingham, when we chant on the streets of London. We want to be able to carry experiences and then chant Harinam. It's super important for us to be able to do that. So, to answer your question, we should never have the desire to go back and leave Vrindavan, except for the mood of wanting to further the mission of Mahaprabhu. Because until we do that, until our hearts become free from desires of wanting to experience the world or experience the world in one way or the other, we wouldn't be able to fully understand Rajalila, and we would not be able to comprehend. But we would surely receive mercy, enough mercy, and that nectar, the sweetness, can be carried. And then when we chant on the streets of Birmingham, that sweetness would come out through our Harinam. Our Harinam is as good as our realizations of Nam. As a consequence, more deeper the experiences are, greater would be our calling of Krishna's names.
Okay, thank you so much. But sometimes you say that Vrindavan is wherever the devotees are, where Krishna Katha is going on. That usually is the way out for someone who cannot visit India, or there's restrictions. Say that actually, or to say I should live in Mathura, or you should live in a Dham. To say that Dham is wherever there's Krishna Katha, where there is a Krishna temple. That is Dham. So what do we say to that? To those people?
Very important for those who live in the West is for us to engage our limbs in the service of Krishna. There has to be a lot of service, because the Western world, there's a lot of opportunity to come in touch with objects that are completely disconnected from Krishna. And because we come in touch so profoundly in the West, and I lived there for 30 years, so I'm fully aware. So because we come in touch so profoundly in the West with objects that are not in touch with Krishna, it's very important for us to consistently offer service so that we could purify our existence by offering service. So there has to be a lot of service while we exist in the West. So the point I'm trying to make is, Katha is important, yes. Wherever there is Krishna Katha, wherever Krishna's services are happening, and wherever there is the deity of the Lord, absolutely, Srila Prabhupada practically implemented that vision of bringing Vrindavan to the whole world. But from our part, for us to be able to take advantage of such opportunities, there has to be a lot of service, because our limbs have to be purified, because we are in an environment that's quite challenging.
Sure. Thank you, Ravi. Okay, is there any questions now ready? Or shall I just carry on with my questions? Anybody would like to ask a question? I think it's been a tough week. We had a late night as well yesterday. Right, anyway, Prabhuji, just wanted to ask you, okay, we have, all right, okay, Partha Prabhu sending a question. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandas Pranam. Can you please share any of your experience? Wow, very nice question. In Vrindavan.
Yeah, see, this is tough because no one will. What we are supposed to do is as follows, and I'll give you this example. when Vali and Sugriva in the Ramayana, they were fighting with each other quite furiously. Sri Lakshmana wanted a question to be asked of Lord Ram. He asked Lord Ram, saying, how could brothers fight so intensely? Because this is completely unheard of. Brothers fighting so intensely. How could they even do this? Lord Ram did not answer Lakshmanji by saying, not everybody is as good a brother as you are. He answered Lakshmanji by saying, not everybody is as good a brother as Bharata. So that Lakshmanji doesn't basically get praised and develop any kind of misconception on that particular statement. So he doesn't. He's very careful, Lord Ram. He's Maryada Purushottama. So when he speaks, he's very careful about what the outcomes are. So in a similar fashion, we never share experiences because those experiences are considered to be confidential. And in Mahaprabhu's movement, the extent of our experiences is supposed to manifest through the faith that we can distribute to the devotees. So that's what we are supposed to do. So what we are trying to say is that even if I had experiences, I wouldn't be able to share them because it's not considered etiquette in our parampara.
Thank you, Ravi.
You always talk about other people's experiences. You talk about other people's experiences. Like Lord Ram was praising Bharata in front of Lakshman. We talk about other people's experiences, saying this Maharaj had this experience. Srila Prabhupada had this experience. Yeah, we talk about that. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was here, he basically spent time in the Radha Damodar Mandir, and he used to serve in that area. And what used to happen was the fact that if you go around the Radha Damodar Mandir, you will find many connections to Srila Prabhupada. So you can go behind Radha Damodar Mandir, there's a grocery shop. You could buy groceries because that's where Srila Prabhupada bought groceries. Yeah. So you could have all kinds of wonderful experiences. But the point being, I was just wanting to say that Srila Prabhupada never shared his direct experiences. He never did. Despite being Krishna's personal associate, he never did. He never shared who he was in the spiritual sky. He never shared anything of that kind. He used to hold back his ecstasies till the very end. Towards the very end, during the last 2 years or 3 years on the planet, he wasn't able to hold back. And when he stands before the altar, the tears used to come flowing out in streams and torrents. Before that, he used to hold back those tears. He would never even show his ecstasies to others. So practically, he demonstrated what we ought to do. Even if you have such experiences, you hold them back because it's the proper etiquette. And instead, share what people can use, such as the external habits of being able to chant, having faith in Nam, having faith in Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's what he did. So we just want to follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Ravi. Wonderful reply there to that question. Just want to ask Prabhu, in our bhakti, similar sometimes even material things that we tend to come to a stage where we think we're hitting a brick wall. Now this in bhakti terms could be with our chanting or our preaching or even learning. We just like nothing is going in anymore and the preaching is really not improving. Whereas you see other devotees, they straight away they're flowing very nicely in all. So what to do in that situation that I'm talking about sport because sometimes you find that in sport that you just can't get any better, that you've reached a point at a level that you think can't get beyond that. And you find that in bhakti as well sometimes we just don't see, are we causing offenses or something going on in the background that's causing that just not moving forward, there's no shift.
The possibilities do exist that we could be committing offenses, but then we don't need to assume that. We don't need to assume that. We want to carefully always endeavor to be careful with devotees, but at the same time, we also want to have an understanding about how devotional service progresses. Devotional service is, as I mentioned earlier on in the session, is like climbing a peak. If you're climbing a peak which is quite steep, as you go higher and higher, you will find that it becomes harder. But then we have already had a lot of experiences, and as a consequence, those experiences can motivate us to put more service. So the point is, there is a necessity for us to go back and see that, am I doing what I did last year? If I'm doing what I did last year, if I'm doing what I did the year before, if I'm doing what I did 2 years before that, then why should I expect any good result this year? Because maybe my effort has not changed. So that's the first question that has to be addressed. And you can basically monitor the level of effort. Now, the other point is the intensity. Bhakti requires intensity. Krishna consciousness requires intensity because it is not easy to penetrate the modes of nature. One requires a laser-like focus, and the laser-like focus can come after prayers. So we consistently offer prayers like our acharyas did on their inability to move forward. And those prayers are very genuinely offered by the acharyas, by our spiritual precedents, in the sense who existed before. And we accept those and we offer it to Krishna so that he could give us help. So the first assumption is to examine our effort. If our effort is the same, then we need to increase our effort. Number 2 is to add prayers to the mix. Number 3 is to basically also have the understanding that we are supposed to monitor and improve upon our effort, but we may not be able to control the outcomes. So even though our effort could be very good, the outcomes themselves are in Krishna's hands. So this philosophical understanding should also be very clearly understood, where we always understand that we are endeavoring as if everything depends on us, but then ultimately Krishna is the giver of results. So that is the third philosophical aspect that also has to be embraced fully.
Thank you. Thank you, Ravi. Yeah, I mean, last couple of classes I've heard, they're saying that you can put a lot of effort in, can be really hard worker, doing a lot of service, but is it coming from the heart? That's the important thing. You could do little service, but with intensity, as you said, and from the heart, that is more important than doing a lot of service, but doing in like a mechanical way. So I think that's, and I think we tend to lose that, the intensity with time. We start doing like automatically doing services, but losing the feelings. The feelings go. We just do it anyway. Maybe we're doing rather, for as a friendship thing, or just as a normal, just to pass the time. That it will pass the time better if I did something. But the real reason of devotion, it's just a service now. It's not a devotional service, so to speak. I think that is the danger, isn't it?
True. That is because we are most of us, I would say practically all of us, have tendencies of being very impersonal. And we are trying to work on the impersonal aspect and become more personal, where we care for each and everything we do. But the caring part doesn't just come spontaneously during service. The caring part can only be motivated by Nam. So if we improve upon Nam, everything else will just fall in place, is the point I want to make. Is that if we face problems where we are facing obstacles and everything else we do, stop everything else and focus on Nam. Start working on Nam. Start improving on Nam. And once we reach steady seva of Nam, then we have the ability to understand that the obstacles themselves will be removed by Lord Krishna's names, because Nam has the ability to give us the ability to serve.
Thank you. Wonderful, Ravi. Excellent. I don't know if anybody else wants to ask questions, or shall I just carry on? I've got a couple of more questions, and then we can conclude the program. Now, this Tinada Vishneshana, Therapy Sessionana, I mean, this ideal behavior that we try to provide as a devotee. We don't want to cause offenses. We don't want to say anything wrong. So we want to have this ideal behavior in ISKCON or in Bhakti, with all the devotees. Now, while we try to employ this ideal behavior, we tend to suppress our emotions. Yeah. So those emotions that we're suppressing all the time because we want to say something, but we don't because you don't want to cause offense. Now you're holding back your emotion. Now those emotions have to be released somewhere, somehow. If they are all ready to explode inside you, they have to go somewhere. And as you mentioned, mundane, like watching movies and things like mundane things like that, material things. I think sometimes people watch these, say some movies, just to release those emotions through these mundane things, material things. Like watching, say, violent movies. You've got so much aggression built up because people have been obnoxious with you, they behave badly. So you will process your emotions through a movie. You want to sort of you picturize yourself doing that, but without legally doing anything illegal. But how can we do this in a spiritual way then? If we don't do that, okay, let's not do the mundane things. Then how can we process these built up negative emotions in a spiritual way?
Yes, basically, there can be Ishtagoshtis that can be conducted within the temple environment, but the Ishtagoshtis themselves have to be restricted to different levels of devotees. So you can have different concentric circles of devotees with X number of service, X number of years, hierarchy, so on and so forth. So there are Ishtagoshtis where there is open expression of the difficulty in the heart so that it doesn't remain in the heart, it is released out. So it's very important. So the point I'm trying to make is expressing this particular difficulty openly to the other Vaishnavas is the best way to release ourselves of negative emotions. Now, one of the ways to do it is to start with first expressing our issues to those who are senior to us, whom we have a lot of confidence in. It has to be a confidential relationship. We need to be able to trust them. They need to be able to trust us. Mm-hmm. And then we are able to open our hearts to those who are senior to us. And then they have the ability to basically help us with suggestions on how to process the situation. That is the second suggestion. The first suggestion is Ishtagoshti. This has to be organized by the leadership, because if a lot of devotees are frustrated and so on, then there is something going on overall in the yatra, and that needs to be fixed. It's a leadership, what I would call as a leadership issue. It needs to be dealt with. Individually, if a devotee is very frustrated, then they should seek help from those whom they consider as their mentors and gurus, Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, and they should express themselves saying, this is the situation. Because those who are helping us have the ability to see the truth, and they have the ability to basically guide us. So there has to be an exchange of faith. So this is the second repository thing. So very important to express ourselves. This is very important. Very, very important. Yeah. So, the problem with watching and coming in touch with material nature profoundly is that it'll only get worse. It's not going to get better. So there is no such thing as release. It's a samskara. If someone is violently angry with someone else, they want to basically throw, a stone at the other person because they're very angry, and they watch a movie which is equally violent. There is no release. It only creates a different kind of samskara in the heart. And the next time, the movie would have also contributed to different ways in which the aggression can be implemented. So one needs to understand that watching and coming in touch with material phenomena cannot resolve low consciousness. Low consciousness can only be resolved by coming in touch with higher consciousness. So that's what one needs to employ.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you. Okay, last chance to ask questions. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. Now, Prabhuji, as always, would love to hear Narasimha prayer from you. Please pray for all of us.
I would love to. Yeah, I would love to do that, Prabhuji, but I'm actually having a flu. So past week or so I can. So I've just somewhat. I wish I would offer this the next time. I promise, but I refused you once before, so I'm refusing you again.
No, it's not a problem.